Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today we have our host, Rick T. Or I apologize, our guest, Rick T, joining us. He's from Mountain Standard Time there in Utah. How are you doing today? How's everything going for you today, Rick?
Doing very well. Thank you for asking. Good day to be sober. Happy to be here.
Yes, we were just speaking about it. Super Bowl Sunday. Good day to be sober.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, I guess, about your childhood and growing up.
Okay. I'd be happy to. First and foremost, I'm happy to be sober. I'm at it nine years and a little over 1 month.
Congratulations.
At this point, thank you. A little bit about me and how my story unfolded. I was a product of a single parent household. My mom, my real father, had never really been in the picture. I lived with my grandparents and some aunts and uncles. My real father was also an alcoholic addict. And later on in our story, it may come up again. He died of hepatitis C back in '85. I was 15 years old at that time. He was an intravenous drug user, but little did I know that that was part of the reason that he was not around during my early childhood years. I was fortunate enough to where my mother had met a gentleman whom I call Dad today, and he took me in. My parents, I call them my parents, my mom and my dad. They married in '77, and then fast forwarding to, I had a relatively normal childhood. Went to school, participated in sports, had a great circle of friends. Um, it was probably my last year of junior high and definitely going into high school is when I noticed that my mom was developing her addiction as well. Uh, my mother ultimately passed away from this disease. And again, we can touch base on that too. But it was in high school. My mom, both my parents, my father was very strict. I grew up in a traditional Catholic home. Religion wasn't overbearing, but it was practiced. But my dad was very strict with me, very high standards, grades, how I participated in sports. There was physical discipline. Mom, she was doing the best that she could, but I noticed that during my high school years was when we noticed that her alcoholism was really taking over. Uh, she had a tendency to, we developed what kind of like a friendship in high school. I had that cool mom that eventually, we were smoking weed together, and sometimes we'd get her uh, buzzed enough to where she might go buy us alcohol, during our high school years. And but that seemed to be fun and cool at the time. But looking back on that now, that was so destructive and not the proper relationship that a mother and her son should have. I'd like to say that my friendships were good in high school. I did start to experience or experiment, I should say, with alcohol. I'd have to say that my first drink was something I have to say as well is my parents met. My dad was a manager of a private club, so like a nightclub, and my mom was a waitress there, and that's how they met. I started working in these nightclubs at the age of 12, doing miscellaneous chores and duties, cleaning up, cleaning tables and chairs, throwing trash out, things like that. Started working in the kitchen
Were
when
these
I
like
was
topless
16.
clubs, or what kind of clubs were
No,
these?
like nightclubs, like dance clubs. They had
Okay,
live bands. They had dinner and dancing kind of thing.
gotcha.
Back then, they called them private clubs only because you had to have a membership in the state of Utah to go to any of these clubs. So if I wanted to go to that club, I had to buy a membership. If I wanted to go to that club, I had to buy a membership. That was the thing in Utah. It's not existent anymore, but that's what they were referred to as private clubs. What you're referring to is strip clubs. And no, I didn't work in any of those. Um, but um, so I did work in those, and so I was around that environment, and that I think that was crucial to include. I didn't see it to be an issue, but it was at the age of 13. I remember my first experience being under the influence, and that's when, St. Patty's Day. I mean, that's huge. I don't care what state you live in. It's huge day to party. So my dad kept me out of school to help work a golf tournament on that day. Um, and during that day is the first day that the cook and his assistant were pouring beers into cups for me to drink when we were driving around in the golf cart, feeding everybody else their alcohol. And that was my first experience drinking. Then into high school, we would drink, and ever since the beginning, I noticed that I always drank for the effect. It was never a social thing. We would put our beers, and beers didn't taste that good when you're, 14 or 15 years old. So we would, get them as cold as possible, and so we could drink them as fast as possible to get that buzz. Progressing through high school, I did experiment with marijuana, of course. And then when one of my jobs, I used to clean clubs as well. And because my dad managed and owned nightclubs throughout those years, and my mom worked in them as well, we had many connections with people around the valley. So I was cleaning during non-business hours because I wasn't 21, but I was cleaning 2 different clubs simultaneously. And it was a good job because it was very flexible hours. It was cash. But many times, I mean, I'd take beer from the walk-in coolers. I mean, you know what a walk-in looks like. It's a bedroom full of produce and food, and then you had one that was strictly for beer.
Yeah.
And I would help myself. I'd go shopping, and I was the guy. Rick always had the connections. But then cleaning, you can imagine, people getting faded or getting fucked up, I guess you could say, to point where they lost things. And I used to find packages on the floor, what I found out to be cocaine. I had never touched it at that point, never experimented with it. I knew a couple of my friends had. So
How'd you find out what it was?
I did find out what it was because I gave it to them to test because they had experimented with it. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I assumed. But that's when I kind of dabbled with that a little bit. And then, out of high school, 18, 19 years old, we just, we partied. I experimented with acid and cocaine and marijuana and mushrooms. Also, another friend of mine was back then, I didn't realize what it was at the time. I mean, we called it crank. And I don't know if you're familiar with that term. I don't know how old you are, but it was
I've
speed.
heard that it was something along the lines of crack.
No, it was speed. But what my understanding is that that's kind of like the predecessor to crystal meth, because it was synthetically made, but it was powder form. And when you snorted it, it was speed. Speed is a term we got, that was from when I was a little kid. I mean, who uses that term anymore? But it was crank. It was something that was cheaper. It was a different buzz than cocaine, easier to get. And we experimented with that. We had somebody that was in our circle that was a distributor of that. We have an area that's east of us that people would, we met this group of people. It was from a place called Roosevelt, Utah. There's a reservation up there, and there's also some natural gas pipelines up there, but absolutely nothing to do for social lives. So people would move down to Salt Lake, and Salt Lake was relatively small. It still is, but growing. But we met this group of people, and one of the gals there, when she made her connections down here, she was the supplier for everybody back home up in that area. But that's where I experienced that. Then as soon as I turned 21, I started working, and this is where it gets a little interesting, because what I experienced growing up in my childhood, my biological father was never around. He passed away when I was 15. The day that we buried him, we had his ashes cremated and brought back here to Utah, because they didn't even know who he was. He died in Bakersfield, California. They had to identify him by his dentures because he had no identification. He was basically homeless and just wandering. but we didn't find out about it until much later. So we brought his ashes back here. I found out I had a sister. I met her for the first and only time that day. Um, and God, I kind of drawn a blank for a second. But so growing up and experiencing, what I did with my mom with her alcoholism and her use, um, my father being, very strict, disciplinarian. There was some physical abuse going on as well. I had this feeling, I had this notion that I wanted to help young people. I didn't want people to experience what I did growing up, whether that be uh, the dynamics of the home, or wanted to show them there's other ways to deal with that. Uh, Definitely not what I was doing. But I started working with young people. I started working with kids at the age of 20 in a local boys and girls club. You couldn't work with the teenage population until you turned 21. So then I turned 21 and I started working in group homes for at-risk youth, um, but living double standards. I mean, here I am wanting to help these kids, but then I'm still partying. And it was my messed up mindset was that I never counseled them or talked to them about abstinence of alcohol and drugs. I didn't glorify it or brag about it, but I never necessarily talked about that because I knew I was still doing that on the weekends or when I was away from work. But at 21, I started as a bar back in the same club that I worked at in high school, but now I was 21. So I was able to work during, business hours, and 3, 4 nights a week I worked there. I ended up working there for 10 years. Um, so, if anybody works in that environment, I mean, you don't have to partake in everything that goes on as far as the parties and the drinking after hours, or, um, because you are working all the time, then you take your weekend becomes Sunday, Monday. Uh, the drugs that fly through those types of establishments. I mean, it's what you can assume it happened. Um, but it was during a relationship that I had with the gal that there were, many situations to where she made comments that, I'm concerned, your mom's an alcoholic and some of your behavior is showing the same. And I just blew it off, no, not me. I'm too young kind of thing. I'm not going to have a problem. I mean, I would work every Tuesday. Tuesday night was ladies' night. I'd work every Friday and Saturday night because that's the weekends. That's where the money was at. And then during football season, we had Monday Night Football. So I was working 4 nights a week. And because I was working 4 nights a week, I'd go out at least 2 nights a week. So 6 nights a week, I was drinking or drinking to get the effect, and also using to get the effect. Had made a lot of connections with people in the nightclub business that I could get anything I wanted at any time. A lot of times it was given to me because I was the guy that was pouring their drinks. I would serve them first. I would give them the best. I would give them more. I was the guy to go to for the alcohol, and sometimes my tip wasn't, currency. It was something else. And so um, that's what led me into full-fledged, alcoholism. That's also where I met my wife. um, she had been coming into the club for many years, or for a couple years, on a fake ID. And that little did I know that when she came in on her birthday, this one particular night, that was her 21st birthday. And I was 23 at the time. And we had met and we established a relationship. I found out that she was honest with me after a couple of months. She hid it well, but she was pregnant, and not by me. This was before a relationship right before me, but he denied all responsibility. I was interested enough with her that I appreciated her honesty and just wanted to move forward with the relationship. Well, I've been blessed, and that's a young lady that I call my daughter today. I raised her as my own, and she's 28 now, and a nurse, and married, and doing
Wow.
wonderfully. Yeah, it's great. I gave her my name from the very beginning. This gentleman didn't. This person. I say gentleman because it's weird how years and years of time pass and how events have unfolded, is that he's kind of come back into the picture. And all along I knew who he was. I knew who this guy was. But so going back to that relationship, So we started a life together, and me still working with young people. She also comes from a background where the person that she was dating before me, long term, they had broken up. She dated a couple of guys briefly, but that person that she was with long term, he was a dealer. And so she had been exposed to that lifestyle as well. A dealer of cocaine was his thing. Um, so her and I had more than interests in each other's looks and other positive ambitions, but we also both like to party. We ended up getting married and having another child together, and we bought a home. Unfortunately, her mother had passed and left the home to the kids. We bought the siblings out, so we had that same home. That was a blessing and a curse at the same time, because um, that turned into a party house. I mean, while I was out working in the club, she was entertaining friends and family on the weekends as well. So um, I knew what I was missing when I was working. And so when I'd come home or I'd miss work, to come home to party with them, just led to a lot of, you know, uh, dysfunction. Um, we met another circle of friends that also there was a gal that was a cocaine dealer as well, and befriended her. And I had another friend from a different circle, so it was always around. So I'd say that I was doing that almost every weekend for, I can't count how many years. Crown Royal and cocaine, that was a beautiful marriage for me at that time. And I can joke about it now, but I can see how destructive that was back then. And then again, here I am still working with adolescents, working my way up into a position with a very difficult to get position, paid well for that period of time, great benefits, worked me 4 10-hour shifts so I could work 3 hours at the club and have one day off to focus on family. But over time, that one day off basically was the day for my wife and I to play. And what I mean by play is we partied together.
Yeah.
We'd get a babysitter and whatnot. Um, After ultimately my alcohol, my drinking, and partying, she partied just as much, but I I drank to the point to where I would pass out, black out, things like that. It ultimately ruined our marriage. Divorce came in 2002, and I mean, I was floored. I mean, here I am. I was in my 20s working for the organization that was a hard to get job. I was making good money. I was working a side job that paid me very well. We had a house and 3 or 4 cars, and we traveled, and we go camping. I mean, it looked like we were doing really well. But we pissed off a large savings account, because we were very irresponsible. Drugs and alcohol took over any and all responsibility that we had. Um, 2002, uh, I woke up and she had moved out, and I kind of felt that might be coming just because we were getting behind in mortgage payments, and I thought that we were going to do that together. But she got her own place, and all within that year, 2002, we separated. Um, she started seeing someone else mid-year. We divorced. She was pregnant. She got married, all in that same year. So she went to her next relationship. 2002, I had that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. Family came in. My mom came and said, "You should come back and stay with us. We're concerned for you." And so I did. And that was great that my family was looking out for me and was supportive of me. But I can't believe that they took me underneath the roof and back into the home, because it was like also enabling me. But I was devastated. I had a house full of my children's stuff. I had my wife, my 2 kids, beautiful home, completely furnished. I had to move everything that was left that she didn't take upstairs and make this apartment upstairs, and the basement was empty. Very depressing. But I found another job. I had gotten let go from that great job that I had earn my way into. And it's very difficult to be let go from that particular organization. You have to fuck up pretty good, and I did. And they gave me warnings, and ultimately I got let go. I found another job working with adolescents. Started working that one. Something I need to touch base on too is during one of my wife's, her and I, we would argue a lot. Never put our hands on each other. But there was one instance that took place to where we were screaming and yelling so loud at each other in the garage and the garage door was open, that a neighbor across the street could hear us. I was loud and aggressive, and she yelled for that neighbor. Cops got called, and I got a domestic disturbance, and so that was my a charge that I got along with my first DUI. I got in 1999 as well. I totaled one of my vehicles. Both of those got a plea in abeyance upon not drinking. I don't know how I was able to do that, but I didn't drink for however long they asked me to. It was a very short period of time, and comply with expectations of the court. So I got those reduced or removed from my record for a plea in abeyance is what they call it. But that was my first experience with the law in that way as an adult. I escaped all those situations, all those years that I was carrying drugs and alcohol, and because I had friends that were dealers, I was able to hook people up, and I'd have large quantities on me. And if I sold this guy that, then all my stuff would be free. What I would use them for my own stash. But I bring up that dabbling with the law because that's going to come up a little bit later as well. 2002, I started working with this one organization with kids as well. I met a group of guys that were also ironically either getting divorced or recently divorced. So there's like 5 of us. So like every single weekend we would go out. With my wife meeting this new gentleman, they got married, of course, as I mentioned. But because of my drinking and because of the bitterness from the relationship, seeing my kids on a regular basis, it wasn't really happening. It got to the point to where in 2004, because I was drinking every day. I mean, I literally was drinking every day. I would wake up and my breakfast was a couple pulls from the bottle. And then I figured if I just do that in the morning and stop, then I should be good to go when I show up for work. And then like a dumbass, I mean, these young kids, they were coming from homes where they had alcoholic parents. They were coming from homes where they were abused or neglected. I was fooling myself if I didn't think for once that they wouldn't smell that on my breath. Even if it had been at 8 or 9 in the morning, by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, when you're drinking every day like that, that shit's coming out your pores. I mean, it's just in you. So my work, and meanwhile on the weekends, still doing the heavy drugs as well. But my work stepped in. One of the administrators was in recovery. He identified the signs. He saw what was going on. He met with me on the side. They offered to do an intervention and asked me if I'd be willing to go to treatment. And I said, yes, I would. I wanted to keep my job. I knew I wasn't heading down a good road. So I said yes. So I went through treatment. It was an outpatient treatment program, but it was your 30-day program, Monday through Friday. Got involved in meetings with our local AA groups, started working the steps. And part of the program is you work through step 4 within that 30 days time. Everybody in my life was happy and supportive. And I stayed sober. That was in October of 2004. And I stayed sober until March of the following year. During 2004, also at that time, my ex-wife had informed me that her new husband got a transfer opportunity with his company, and they were moving to the East Coast. They were moving to North Carolina. My kids were 8 and 4 at that time. And that just floored me. And I can't believe that I stayed sober during that announcement. We had Thanksgiving, we had Christmas, and they moved the day after Christmas. They packed up and went to North Carolina. And I that just was, I mean, if anyone is a parent, and especially struggling with addiction and alcoholism and this bitterness of a divorce, that just ripped my heart out. Maintain daily contact with my kids. And then in March, I had made arrangements to go out and see them in North Carolina, and I was still sober. Um, First time making plans to travel like that on my own and doing it sober. So riding that high, that feeling of accomplishment, that confidence, um, and we all know what that does to, well, what that can do for someone that's in recovery, especially. I was only what is that, 5 months, barely over 5 months sober. Well, I had a little money in the bank. I was working a side job as well at a retail store. So I was working two jobs. Um, I had a car, and because I had nothing when I got divorced. I mean, we had literally had nothing. Um, but I had a car. I had some savings. I had planned this trip with my kids, and I flew out of here, and I ended up in Dallas for a layover to get on my second flight. And I don't know what came over me, but it was, I'm gonna have a cocktail. I'm gonna reward myself, for look what I've accomplished, look what I've done so far. And so I did. And I had a cocktail, and I had another. Made it to North Carolina. Went out and grabbed my kids. Stayed in their town, which is right outside of Raleigh. Had a wonderful time. I was sober when I was there with my kids. I had to go back to Raleigh and spend the night there because the next morning my flight left. But that after having that time with my kids and leaving them there, that was very hard. Got back to Raleigh, and I hit the clubs, and I just went on I mean, want to call it a bender, I don't know, but I got fucked up. And immediately upon coming back to Salt Lake, that was it. Reconnected with the gal that was my supplier from before. Um, I was able to get an opportunity to move into this house, this big, enormous, beautiful house, and share rent with someone that I met in my treatment program. She was still sober. Her addiction was meth. She was sober from all substances and alcohol, and I thought that might be a good opportunity for me to move in, but I was drinking and using while in my portion of the home. But that summer was probably one of the worst summers that I'd ever had, only because my kids were still in North Carolina. I had reconnected with people that I was buying from before, and I was using I had weekends off. And so every Friday at 3 o'clock, I would show up to my friend's place of work, and she worked in a golf course restaurant. And I would drink for free. I would buy my package from her, my Coke, and I would party from Friday till Sunday, and then go back to work on Monday, and then get off on Friday, and that was a repetitive cycle. Um, we ended up later on that summer dispute over money. We severed ties with one another, but also during that summer, I'm embarrassed to say, but I was 35 at the time. But you, when you're drinking and using at the same time, and I know many people can relate to this. If you're drinking only, you get fucked up, you pass out, you drive drunk, people black out. When you're using only, and I've never done that because I never just used a substance alone. It always was with drinking. But you get that feeling that you like to ride, where I was drinking and using at the same time. Well, I didn't have any connections anymore for, cocaine or substance, but I was still drinking the same quantity as I was when I was using, but obviously getting more intoxicated because that wasn't keeping things balanced for me. But anyway, did my first beer run at the age of 35 and got caught. Um, and also was on driving on a expired license and no insurance. And so I picked up 4 or 5 charges in the same night, and I can't believe he didn't give me a DUI. That cop actually drove me home. It was nuts. I should have been.
Wow.
Yeah, he did. We did a blood alcohol, but I passed the field sobriety test. But then when they had me blow, they looked at me in amazement because I shouldn't have been standing. I should have been in the hospital. My BAC was so high. It was, I can't remember what it was. It was ungodly high. I shouldn't have been alive, really. They shit their pants, and he was just like, man, I'm gonna get you home. Do you live close? And I'm like, actually, I live down the street. So he took me home. But shit, that didn't do anything for me. I continued to get in trouble with the law, stupid shit that, I mean, I wasn't out breaking into cars and beating people up, but God, it exposed me. I was during the other period of time, I was hanging out with people that, I mean, the guys, some of them were gangbangers from the past, but my age now. So we were grown up, but still in their criminal activities. And I mean, I shouldn't have been hanging out with them. I shouldn't have been hanging out with the people that I was, but I did. And now I have a criminal record, and that developed to just, I mean, my record, when I get it from our local bureau of criminal investigations or backgrounds, my record looks like this. But a lot of them were just not showing up for court, not complying with the orders of the court, not showing up to see your probation officer, things like that. Fast forward to 2008, I was able to land another good job, or 2007, I landed another good job, did well for that for about 1.5 years. And then they caught on to my drinking as well. I used to operate heavy equipment because I wasn't able to get a job working with kids anymore. I ultimately got let go from that one. I have not shared my story all the way from the beginning. So if I'm rambling, forgive me.
No, not at all. No, you're great. Keep going.
But so I lost that job, drinking. They had me do my BAC shot through the roof, but I was drinking on the job during that period of time. I had on the back of my forklift in my backpack, I'd always take a pint with me to work.
Really?
And when things slowed down, we'd sip a little bit. We worked the night shifts when all the management had gone away. Well, that was during right before the recession. And I worked for a lumber supply company. And so we switched our shifts. So now we're all working during the day. So now everybody's eyes was on everybody, and they kind of picked up on Rick's acting different, Rick's being different. And when I walked in, they could smell, and they ran me up to this diagnostic center where they contracted to do drug tests, alcohol tests, and my VAC level. Again, I was functioning and walking and talking what I thought was normal, but was through the roof. They let me go. Was able to get another job with another company, again, operating heavy equipment.
How were you able to get that new job? Did they know about what just happened?
Apparently not. And I told them it was a reduction of force, I'm sure, which was true at the time. They were laying people off. But I was a lead there. And I mean, again, aside from all of this, I mean, I had the uncanny ability to, my personality, I was able to bullshit well with people. I was a good guy. I just was a fucking alcoholic and an addict, and I had a lead role. But they let me go, and I went to the next one, and I told them it was a reduction of force, which was happening, was not uncommon at that point in time. And it was a smaller lumber supply company. Now I went to one that used to supply them, and they supplied all of the Western US. And I was able to get a job with them. But then I had this something that had never happened to me before. And I had a petit mal seizure while operating my forklift.
Were you intoxicated when this happened?
No, I was not. And it was the craziest thing. And also, we all know that, when people quit drinking, they experience, DTs, they experience nausea, they experience seizures, things like that. I had no history of seizures. It wasn't a full on grand mal seizure, but it was like time stopped. I had 2 hours of time that I was unaccounted for. And thank God I did not hurt somebody or myself. And we were working the night, so there was no customers in the yard. There were nobody walking, but other people operating forklifts in the area. You imagine this enormous lumber yard that covers acres and acres of property. But finally, one of the leads found me, and he's like, Rick. And I really wasn't responding or replying, and I'm just sitting there. And he got me to get off my forklift and then walked me back to the office. They ended up calling the EMTs, and they came. And I had bitten my tongue, and I was bleeding down the sides of my mouth. And they were like, "You're done. We can't have you." They didn't let me go. They said, "You need to go see a doctor and find out what's going on." Well, my doctor that I went and saw, of course, my work wouldn't let me come back until my doctor signed off, and they did a gamut of tests. He also was in recovery, and I didn't know it at the time. But after about a month of meeting with him, it came out. But lo and behold, how did I find this guy? So he said, "There's no way that I'm going to let you go back and operate heavy machinery or sign off for you to return to work full duty until you give me 4 weeks of clean UAs." And he did the kind of UA where they can test alcohol going back even 4 or 5 days. There's a specific term for it, and I can't remember it. So, we all know that as alcoholics and addicts, we know, well, if I use on this day, I know I'm going to be clean on this day. Or if I smoke weed on this day, I know I can give a clean UA on this day, and kind of time it out, or ways to flush your system. But this one with alcohol, God, I wished, and my other treatment center would use the same method of tests. If I drank on a Monday, they could detect it on a Friday. So I had to submit random
just for
UAs.
people who don't know, we're talking about P tests.
Yes,
UAs because I was just thinking I had some people. I was saying, my friend the other day, saying how it's funny how as addicts, we have our own terminology. We know the legal jargon, we know rehab jargon, we know all the types of things that people may not know what we're like. We say UA, and I know what you're talking about, but to the regular listener may not know. That's P test.
Yeah, urine analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's different ways to test. I mean, we should know is that they can test they can do a breathalyzer, you can do a urine test, they can give a blood test, and that's
Hair test.
Blood test, they can do hair tests. Exactly. Most commonly used is urine, unless they feel that urine produced a negative test result, but they're convinced you are under the influence of something, so they'll order a blood or a hair. But anyway, so my doctor would require drug tests or UAs on a random basis, but I had to do them weekly, and there's no way that I could have drank and got away with it. So I got sober. I did go to some meetings during that period of time. I was able to return to work, but on light duty. But they're paying me the same wage they were paying me operating equipment, but they wouldn't let me get back on equipment at the time. So I stayed sober, and they ended up they found a way to let me go. They saw me cleaning out in the front area, which happened to be the smoking section, and I was smoking while working out in the front of the property. But they were looking for a reason to let me go, and I was probably just a pain in the ass to them, and I can see that. So they let me go. So I had at this point gone to treatment, stayed sober for 5 months, relapsed, got sober from my doctor. So a work intervention, a medical intervention, and I relapsed again. And this was in 2008 or 9. So now I kind of got myself in the position to where I had no car, I had no license. I had an injury when I was a little boy to my eye that's left me legally blind. And you have to answer back then you had to answer questions in a certain way. And I had surgeries on my eye, but I didn't wear glasses, but I had impaired vision. So I didn't update my license. And so then I had to go and update it with the DMV, and I never did. and my license expired. So I had no current driver's license and I had no car. I had a criminal record. I was an alcoholic, living in what I thought was just severe depression, and saw no way out. I just felt helpless. I was unemployable. I couldn't see my kids as often as I wanted to, but that was all on me. I mean, my wife was difficult. My ex-wife was difficult to work with, but that was all on me. I mean, I was the one that was making things even more difficult by a couple of, and I'll say a couple, it wasn't often, and I'm being honest, but there were times that I would show up late to pick them up, but I was taking the bus, but I would also miss that bus because I was probably hungover from the day before. A couple of times I'd show up and I was still under the influence from the night before. I wouldn't let my ex-spouse pick up my kids either, if they were showing up like that or showing up late. So I only have myself to blame for that. Continue on, 2009, 10, and 11. I continued to get involved. I picked up additional charges, drinking. I was so unemployable that I ended up going down to a day labor place, and I know they have them across the country where they just have guys like me. You could have guys that were maybe out of jail or prison or passing through, didn't have a place to stay, but you go in and put in a day's work, labor, usually cleaning somewhere, doing the grunt work at a construction site, and they pay you that same day. And they pay you minimum wage. But mind you, the reason that I felt helpless and hopeless as well is not only because of my alcoholism, but child support was still coming out of anything that I made. And when you're making, at 40 years old and you're making $7.25 an hour and you're only able to work 4 to 6 hours a day, after taxes, you're taking home $15 a day. And this is in 2010 and 11. And I was living with family, and they let me, eat there, but $15 a day. What the hell can you do with that? Well, what it did is it buy me a pack of smokes and a bottle, and that's what it did. And I did that for probably 2 years. And then in and out of jail too, for not taking care of my obligations to the court. I couldn't comply, or didn't want to show up to court because of I was either drunk or they might order another UA, and I shouldn't have been drinking as one of the conditions of being on probation. So here I go from this guy that's working in youth corrections and these great roles that I got, all the while bullshitting people, living double life. Now I'm 40 years old and can't get a job, can't get a car, don't have any credit. Working for $15 a day just to keep a bottle in my hand. Didn't have any money for drugs. I didn't, and plus I knew the probation didn't. I wasn't going to show up with a dirty UA for like anything, any substance. Alcohol, I didn't know what they were doing for that, but that's what it was doing. Was $15 a day was letting me buy a bottle and buy a pack of smokes. Did that for a couple of years. Spent a total, I added it up one time, of 18 months in jail, in our county jail. Longest period of time was about 6 months, but I'd gone back so many times for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It added up to about 18 months, so a year and a half. Finally went in late 2011, right before Thanksgiving, and I missed my first Thanksgiving and my first Christmas being away from my kids, because they only stayed in North Carolina for about a year. That didn't work out for them, so they'd come back here. And that was back in that time frame that I'm speaking on. So in that last time in jail, and I always hear about guys coming out of jail and all focused and positive. Oh, I'm going to do well. I'm going to stay clean. I'm going to stay sober. I'm going to do everything I got to do. And they get back out and they just, more often than not, my experience, I saw them just going back in the same bullshit, same lifestyle.
Yeah, the rate of recidivism is very high. No matter how high the hope, the rate of recidivism is very high.
It is very high. and more often than not, they're just staying sober for the terms of probation or to satisfy the judge's requirements, and just long enough to do that. Well, I worked in jail, in our county jail, they have a 2-man cell and they have an 8-man cell. And an 8-man cell is usually reserved for those that want to work in the kitchen. Working in the kitchen gives you a lot of different perks or bonuses. For one, you eat better. It helps time go by faster because you're working 12-hour shifts. You're working in the kitchen and you're feeding thousands of other inmates. Being in an 8-man cell, I mean, you got to imagine the cells aren't that big, but that particular time and me missing the holidays and me being in that position, I knew shit had to change. And I wasn't the kind of guy that would get caught up in the glorifying of your criminal activities, the glorifying and drinking and using. I never fed into that bullshit, but there was this one guy that was about my age that used to get his hands on a lot of community resources. And community resources, what I mean is treatment, job opportunities, how other resources to help people with financial situations, like maybe it was for food stamps, maybe it was for job opportunities, maybe it was for clothing, temporary shelter, things like that. And I kind of gravitated towards this guy. So I got a lot of that information from him. I read a lot when I was in there as well. Made good use of my time as well as you can. And I remember that day being released from jail. I called up it's got an acronym, and it was, I want to say it was ORC, but what that means for anyone out there is it's an organization to where you can go and you can have an assessment done free of charge. It's county funded. Again, I had no job. I had no insurance. I couldn't go to treatment. I knew I needed treatment. So I was going to have to go about it the long and more difficult way. And that was getting on a waiting list. I put myself on a waiting list after I went and had this assessment done. Put myself on this waiting list. It was a 1-year waiting list just to
what led to you wanting to get this assessment done?
Because I knew something had to change. I knew I needed treatment. And in order to be accepted or be put on a waiting list, you had to go have this assessment.
Was there there's usually something like it happens that makes us realize, okay, I need treatment? Was there a reason? Was there an incident that happened?
Well, not one particular. Well, man, I was. What was,
put it this way, what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, because I kept drinking for that entire year. But what the straw that broke the camel's back was, I was 41 years old. I failed a medical or a work employment intervention. I failed to stay sober for a medical intervention. I needed help. I had missed holidays for the first time. I was 41. I had been in jail for the equivalent of 18 months. My health wasn't the best. I knew I needed help. And by me talking with these other gentlemen in my cell, I mean, I'm not going to say it was just those conversations. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Every time that I hit rock bottom, I felt it can't get any worse than this. Until I went back out and I started drinking and I started using again. And my rock bottom was even lower than before. There were times where I had times to reminisce where, I mean, I had never had so much involvement with the law enforcement that I did in that time from 2005 to 2011, and 18 months in jail. The city that I lived in, they knew me just by face and by name. They didn't have to ask for my ID. There were up until that time, there was a time where my dad had to take me to the hospital. I had done some work for a friend where he paid me cash under the table. His wife dropped me down to our local transit. I made it back home. I had told her prior to that how much difficulty I had sleeping, which I did, but because I wasn't really sleeping, man, I was drinking to the point where I was passing out. And you don't pass out for a long time, in my experience. I'd wake up and I'd drink again. Well, she gave me an Ambien, like a dumbass. I took it and I drank on it. Well, I ended up falling that night to where the point, and I cut myself and had to go to the hospital. My dad at 2 a.m, taking his 40-year-old son to the hospital to get stitches because I was so drunk and out of it. Um, I spent a weekend in a local park because I was so fucked up and I was so embarrassed to call anybody. My cell phone died anyway. I didn't eat for 2 days. I was drinking from the water fountain that was there just to keep some water in me. But I was so, that's one thing that I just share with my sponsor too, is that with the alcoholism, it affects people in different ways, or sometimes you can't even predict how it's going to affect you. I'm 5'7", and right now I'm a very healthy 177 pounds. Back then I was weighing 145 pounds, and I was drinking a fifth a day of liquor. And there were times where every morning I'd wake up and I'd take a couple of pulls off that bottle, and it's just like you and I having coffee today. It was normal, and I'd go about my day. But then there were times where I'd take a couple pulls off that bottle and I would pass out within 20 minutes. It was just that chemical imbalance, and what it did to me, I could never predict how it was going to affect me. And that weekend that I spent in the park, I didn't want to be there, but I was so embarrassed and so fucked up that I didn't know how to reach out to anybody. And then I had no way to reach out. My phone had died. And it was me thinking of all those times and thinking of all the things that I had lost and the relationships that I had damaged. My health wasn't good. My relationships were suffering or non-existent. I had lost all trust. I had lost all hope. I just felt like that rock bottom, that was it for me. And everyone has their stories of, I lost a house, I lost a job, I lost a wife, I lost a car, all of that. And yeah, that happened. It did. But it got to the point literally where I knew I had fewer days ahead of me than I did behind me, especially if I was going to continue down this road. My body wasn't going to hold up anymore. When I put myself on that waiting list, do you think that year I would focus on making some changes? No, I kind of took 2012 as a last hurrah, because I knew eventually I was going to get accepted on that list, that waiting list, and I was going to go into treatment. And so I drank and I partied, and I don't remember if I used or not. Honestly, I don't, because I drank heavier than I ever had. Sometimes to the point to where I would drink and I couldn't even keep it down. But then I would keep it down, meaning I would physically get sick because I was just forcing it into my body.
Yeah.
But then I would make a way for it to happen to where I could drink and keep it down. And I wasn't eating, and I could see myself and feel myself withering away, honestly. The treatment center contacted me. They said, we have an opening. I was able to get my phone turned back on and keep it on just by working these. I'd worked some other side jobs and with other temp agencies as well. So I was able to keep my phone on, able to on weekends to keep it together long enough to see my kids. And that's something that was very difficult. We talk about that to this day, what I've done to them, and where the path that my ex-wife took, because she ended up going, and she just got let out of her third treatment center 10 days ago. And I know this because we don't communicate, but I know this because my daughters find out through other family members and friends that she ended up going to treatment again. But I knew my kids didn't have anybody, and I knew that again, I put them through enough. And this was in 2012, like I had said. Finally, that treatment center contacted me, said they had an opening, but I had to go through a 72-hour detox, our local VOA, and that's Veterans Volunteers of America. And I know that's nationwide as well, but it has different roles or different functions in states. But it has we have a treatment center here that's funded by the VOA, and it's county funds. And that's the waiting list that I was on. But I had to do a 72-hour detox at VOA. It's a center where you walk in, they search your belongings, they feed you, and they get you healthy. They monitor you medically by nursing staff, make sure you're not going to put yourself at risk. Um, and I chickened out. This is what I've been waiting for, for almost a whole year. And I'm like, oh shit, it's right here. And I chickened out. Gave him some bullshit story that I had an opportunity to work out of state or out of the city, and I had to go make
What
some.
was the feeling? What was the feeling of fear?
Yes, it was definitely fair. It was fair. Like, oh shit, this is it. Here we go.
Fear of
Didn't
life
know.
without drugs or alcohol scared the shit
Yeah,
out of you that much?
yeah, I did at that time. I did. I didn't know if I could do it, even though this is what I was waiting for. Um, then another 3 to 4 weeks. I think it was another 3 weeks passed, and I made it through the holidays. And I reached out to them, and I said, okay, this is it. I'm ready. And I don't know what came over me at that point in time, but I threw in the towel, as they say. I surrendered because I knew I couldn't do it, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. We're entering 2013 now. I mean, fuck, I'm going to be 43 that year. And the damage, I mean, I've been doing this since I was in high school. And, I mean, I've been talking for 1 hour almost, and I didn't even give you all the ins and outs of the situation that I put myself into.
You're gonna
I
have multiple episodes.
gave you the overview. But so they accepted me again. I went to the VOA. I got my 72 hours, and I started treatment January 8th, 2013. And it's so crazy how this works, because also on that day, and I hadn't told anybody again that I was going to be entering treatment. I wanted to wait until I actually started. But on actually it was January 6th. I'm sorry, January 6th, my oldest daughter called me up crying. And she was 19 at that time. And called me up crying, and she was humiliated. She didn't want to tell me, but I was able to get it out of her. But she called to tell me she was pregnant, which would have been which turned out to be my first grandchild. And lo and behold, I was scheduled to report for treatment on January 8th. And see, I'm kind of getting those days mixed up, because my sobriety date is January 8th, 2013. So those few days I'm getting mixed up, but that was my sobriety date. And then that's when I started treatment. And it was a outpatient treatment center that was 4 days a week for several hours every day. And again, it was county funded. That's what was available to me at the time. And it was supposed to be a 3 to 5 month program. And it's not a step program. They did not follow the 12 steps and 12 traditions. But it was definitely a recovery program. It's supposed to be 3 to 5 months. And I kind of manipulated that in my favor, to where I made that into like a 9 or 10 month program for me. I wasn't fearful of leaving the treatment. I was grateful for the opportunity that it was given me. I was grateful for what I was getting out of it. I also got myself into a position to where I was trusted and respected as far as what I was contributing to the group. It was there was men and women there, but at times it was mostly men or only men. It was rare that you saw a female come through, but nonetheless, as I stretched that program out to be almost 9 to 10 months, and I can't tell you what the feeling that came over me, and the growth that I experienced, and the sense of accomplishment that I experienced in just that first year, and also being in that program. All things that we all look for when we're drinking and using, and we know that what changes need to happen, things kind of fell into place. I mean, everybody in my life, when they saw that I was sober again, started to come back around, started to call, started to message, started to want to be around me. They saw the difference in my face. They saw the difference in my physical appearance. They could hear it in my voice. The difference. This is the old Rick, the good Rick, but even better now because I'm 100%. I am completely sober. But still being on probation, without a license, without a car, still feeling unemployable, right? But I was able to land a job in January of that year. And there were times, I had to, I'd have to walk 45 minutes, and we tease people about that are in recovery or even actively using those fuckers on the mountain bikes. They're everywhere because that's their form of transportation. But I had one in the middle of winter in Utah. That shit's cold, but I got that job, and I kept that job. And actually kept that job till COVID hit, because it was with one of our professional sports teams here in Utah. And I loved the job. Then I ended up getting another job, and I was going through our local workforce services and trying to find, employment. I had gotten through. I was working with the book rehab. Made a lot of connections that way. And then I ended up getting this job that I looked over multiple times because I didn't want to go answer phones. I was 43 years old. I didn't want a job like that. My pride was getting the best of me. And finally I just said, fuck it. I need a job, and I need benefits. I need some insurance. So I took the job, and it ended up being a blessing because, the overtime that was made available to me, the schedule that they gave me, it allowed me to keep my side job. I got terminated from probation. I got my license back all that same year. And my oldest daughter, God bless her, because her shit, she graduated from high school at 17 years old, with half of her associate's degree already under her belt. Went right into college immediately after graduating, but her credit was good. She gave me a car because she went out and financed her first car. So she gave her 43-year-old dad in recovery a car. So now I was off probation. I got my license back. I was able to get and keep 2 jobs. I got a car for the first time since 2005. So in 8 years. And that first year, getting sober was probably one of the best years. They just keep getting better, but it was probably one of the best years of my life. Because you can't, when people think about getting sober and when they're terrified about it, you can't do it for anybody. You can't do it for a partner, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse. You can't do it for your kids. You can't do it for your probation officer or your judge or your employer, as you saw, or your doctor. You can, but what's the likelihood that you're going to remain sober if you're doing it for all the wrong reasons? If you're doing it for other people, you have to do it for yourself. And as we say in the 12 steps, I surrendered. I finally made that realization. And like I said, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had lost so much, so many times over. I've been to jail more times than I wanted to, and that didn't keep me clean. That didn't keep me sober. That didn't keep me from picking up stupid charges. I finally gave in. I finally gave up. I was powerless over alcohol. I was waking up and drinking. I was putting off eating because if I ate, then I wouldn't get the effect that I was looking to get by drinking, and I was numbing myself out. And we talk about, why do we drink? Why do we use? We do it when we want to celebrate. We want to do it when we're happy. We want to do it when we're sad or depressed. We want to do it when we're feeling lonely. We want to do it when we're feeling angry. All of these emotions are reasons that we drink and that we use. But ultimately, we have a problem. We have an issue with dealing with life on life's terms, dealing with emotions, dealing with experiences, um, dealing with situations. You know, did I have fun when I used to drink? Absolutely. I remember those days when it was fun and it was social, and I had some great times and some great memories. When I was able to do it responsibly, you know, but I knew, looking back now, I was never a normal drinker or user. I mean, I did it for the effect, and if some was good, more is always better. I couldn't have just two or three drinks. I couldn't do smoke just one joint. I couldn't do just two or three lines. It had to be an A-ball. Um, it had to be that whole eighth of weed. It couldn't just be a pint. It had to be a fifth, or it had to be a 12 pack in a pint, or then it turned in just a fifth every day. And fifths of cheap vodka it's a lot cheaper than a 12 pack of beer, even a decent beer, and that's what I had gotten myself to, the situation I put myself in. But what sobriety has brought me is unsurmountable. I mean, it's beautiful, is what it's brought me. And and I don't want to warn anyone or give them a false hope, but not picking up once you've made that decision, and once you throw in that towel and you surrender, not picking up for me was relatively easy, because you tell yourself, I'm not going to drink today. Or there are some of those people that say, when people say, oh, you don't drink, maybe tomorrow. Those little phrases that we get accustomed to using or saying when others around us are not used to us not drinking. But no, I'm in recovery. I don't drink anymore. I don't, but not picking up, that was this time in 2013, that was an easy part for me, easy piece of my recovery, because even though it's beautiful and your relationships flourish, but now a lot of the real work begins. And that's because you're learning to conduct yourself in a way that you may never have been accustomed to, because now you're dealing with these same emotions that you are suppressing or were uncomfortable with in the past and used to drink or used to suppress them or enhance them. Now you're doing them sober.
Seems like you've done a lot of self-reflection throughout your recovery.
Absolutely.
Seems like you've gotten to know yourself very well. I was gonna say,
At,
getting towards the end, I was gonna say one of my questions usually is there anything you would give as far as advice to people, what you would do as far as based on your experiences, help someone along, kind of get there faster or easier.
well, hopefully that people wouldn't get to that point. I've met a lot of people in recovery that are, in their first 30, 60, 90 days, and they talk about how difficult it is. And I was fortunate. I really was, in the sense that I wasn't physically addicted. I, no one ever could explain that one seizure that I had. Who knows where the hell that came from? Because there's no history of it in my family that I know of. I mean, when I told my biological father died when I was 15, I don't know anything about that family. But I didn't have DTs. I didn't have those shakes when people quit cold turkey and they have to be hospitalized. There's some people, they quit cold turkey, they die.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was not one of those people. Um, thank God. You know, but I mean, it always gets better. It really does, and you can see that. It's tough and it's hard, but just don't give up, because I mean, it took me the first time back in 2004, and I had never gone more than, the only time I went more than 48 hours without drinking was because, one, it's a Sunday in my state, and they don't, I mean, liquor stores are closed, and you can only buy booze in liquor stores unless you go to a bar. um so liquor stores are closed on a Sunday, and if there's a holiday on a Monday, that pissed me off even more, because that's 2 days I can't go to the liquor store. So I'd have to stock up before, or I'd run out. Then I'd be going to the gas station and buying a 12 pack, and that usually wasn't good enough. But anyway, um, it is hard, but not picking up this time around was relatively easy part, because that's where I was in here, and that's where I was in here, and I'm pointing to my heart. But it was everything else. It's challenging. But not once did I ever think this is so hard, or this is so sad, this is so joyous that I want to celebrate with a drink, or I want to drown my sorrows with a drink, or pick or go find that substance that I used to use. Not once has that ever crossed my mind, because that's how determined I am, because my life was worth it, because I knew I didn't want to be. My sister told me I'm working my steps again, and that's what I highly encourage. Is I know AA isn't for everybody, I know NA isn't for everybody, but oh my God, the support and the love and the camaraderie and the guidance that you get when you enter those rooms. Not a lot of people understand who we are and where we're coming from.
Yeah.
You know, you just will not get it. And I just went to a meeting on Friday, and I just talked with my sponsor again. That's another thing, is that's one thing that I failed to do, is I failed to work the steps. And even this much time into my recovery, here I am 9 years, but I felt something was missing in my life. I'll just say that, in my life, not necessarily in my recovery. And then the past 6 months, I'm thinking again, still, because I was able to get a job as a result of that little shitty contact center, call center job that I picked up. My skills and my abilities were tapped into again, because I was able to get into a trainer role, which is what I used to do with these young people, is what I used to do with those families. I used to mentor and coach. In essence, that's what I did. Okay. So I was able to apply for and get a training role, which paid me a lot more than when in the role I was hired for. Which again, all of those things that I did, because I did go to college for a period of time, and I did get straight A's for a period of time. But I quit going when I met my wife, and when she told me she was pregnant again, but not by me. We hadn't even been intimate yet. I quit going to school. But anyway, it led me into a role now where I'm making a salary that I don't have to work a side job. And it's a very comfortable salary. And the reason I bring that up is because, I lost my track. I lost my train of thought. But going back to the rooms and going back into recovery is the people in AA. I'm sorry. It was something that was missing. I have a great job. My relationships are flourishing. But I felt there was something missing. And then I'm like, you know what, Rick? And I've always wanted to do this. And I'm like, you never worked the steps. You never got a sponsor. And I also, all those times how I want to help people, and that's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I miss working with young people, but I also just miss working with people and where I'm doing something for somebody else besides myself, whether that's just listening, whether it's sharing my experiences, guidance in any way, shape, or form. And then we know in the recovery program of AA that you can't walk anyone through the steps unless you've done the steps yourself. And remember, I only went through step 4, and that was in 2004 in my first treatment program. And so many a meeting, I wanted to reach out and ask for someone to be my sponsor, and here I am, almost 8 years in recovery. And finally, back in October, November, when they asked that at the end of the meetings, is there anybody willing to sponsor or reach out? The hands went up, and I just looked across the room, and I focused my eyes on this gentleman, and I went over and I introduced myself. Finally, I worked up the courage to do it. And why I didn't do it sooner, I don't know, because the reward that I'm getting from working the steps and talking through some of these other issues with somebody is something that I have not gotten in recovery yet. Your relationships come back. I was able to, I'm not involved with the court system anymore. I've got a great job. And my job affects thousands and thousands of people. We're overhauling our state's Medicaid system to make it more affordable and easier to use. And I'm on the training aspect. I'm an instructional designer / trainer. And now I'm in a lead role for this company that's got this government contract, and I'm helping people that way. So that feels good. But again, something was missing, right? So reaching out and getting a sponsor, we reworked the steps, and now here I am on step 9, and I'm making amends. And I'm making amends in step 9 with people that I've harmed. And it's a fabulous feeling, and it's difficult to relive a lot of the stuff that we've done, but it's a wonderful feeling. And I recommend that anyone, if you're not in a recovery program, please find something, and find something that works for you. And not everybody's successful the first time around. um my story is just one story of many that you will hear, that it doesn't always work the first time. Are there people out there that have quit drinking and stayed sober after their first attempt? Yeah, there are, but it's rare. In my experience, it's rare. Many have you've got, what's the I know I have another relapse in me, but do I have another recovery in me? And
It's a great one.
yeah,
That's a great one.
it's a great one, because I don't see myself to have. Siri's talking.
Uh,
Shit. I don't see myself to have another recovery. And I have just come too far. And that thing that was missing, I've definitely found by finding a sponsor and working the steps. Um, because now I'm tapping into emotions that were necessary for me to revisit. I'm speaking now to the people that I've harmed, and I'm fortunate enough to have grown enough in my recovery that I've expressed my gratitude. I have made amends in an informal way over the course of the past 9 years, but now I'm doing it in a way to where I can break it down more in behavior, more in action, more in thoughts and feelings than I've ever felt possible. And I highly encourage anyone to, yes, please seek that help. Don't give up. Um, I'm hoping my story, again, there's I haven't shared like this before, and I love to share only because I'm not ashamed. I've done some fucked up things. I've hurt a lot of people. I've and not just by letting people down. And some of my crimes were assault. Some of my crimes were theft. That's not me. That's not who I am. But that's what alcohol and drugs, that's the position it put me into. Who does a fucking beer run at 35 years old? I mean, that's shit that teenagers do, you know? But there I was broke, and I wasn't done drinking. And I felt it was a good time to run to that grocery store and make away with a couple cases, and I was successful. And then I tried it again and got caught. Um, that's embarrassing, man. I was a mentor to our younger population at one point in time, and here I am doing that. But I'm very proud of where I am today. I'm very proud that I'm working the steps, giving back, volunteering time. Unity service is part of your recovery. It feels good to give back in ways, whether it's volunteering time, volunteering money. Um, I felt this was a great opportunity for me. I saw this, and because I follow these social media, there's more than one organization I follow, but this one is probably one of the more popular, and the podcasts are becoming more common and more impactful, honestly. And I'd love to be a part of it again in any way that I can, um, with no format, with no structure of how this was going to go, and me just talking. I have rambled, I've repeated myself, I'm sure, but there's other things I'm sure I've left out. But I was
no, you
grateful.
were very great. You were very on point, succinct. You're a very good speaker. You would think that you think that you're like a author on what do you call on tour, where you're telling your story over and over and over again. Sound very well spoken.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's recovery is brought me. I'm living a beautiful life. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. But it never really is. But it's easier, and it's easier because I'm sober. Um, I the rewards that I have today is living this life. I mean, think of all the financial trouble you get yourself in. Think of all the damage that you've done to your relationships. Think of all the things that you've done that got you in trouble with the law. Um, mending that shit and putting that stuff back together, it takes time. And I think that's where a lot of people get discouraged, is it doesn't happen fast enough, you know. But one of the worst experiences I had in my recovery, and one of the lowest points in my recovery, is, as I told you, I had earned my way into this role as a trainer. Well, with my experience, with my bullshitting or my gift of gab, I guess, I was able to get an opportunity to interview with a job like Morgan Stanley as a trainer, and they offered me the job. And this salary was exceedingly higher than the salary that I was making. And it was a life-changing event, right? And I knew I could pass a drug and alcohol, or I knew I could pass a drug test. Here comes their background check. So their background check comes through, and they told me that they had found multiple charges on my background, or on my criminal record. I knew that was coming. My pitch to them was that I am now, every single charge that you saw, every single criminal entry that you saw, all was between this year and this year. I was actively drinking and using at that time. I am now sober, and I am now sober this many years. This was in 2017. I had been sober for 4 years at that point. Then they asked me to give them a more in-detailed report. So what I had to do, I had to go around to every courthouse of every jurisdiction, meaning every city that I had offended in, and get court reports, which are public record, okay? So anybody can get them. So I had to go around and get court reports and submit them to this company's vendor that does the background checks. But so here I am getting this job. I'm riding a high. This is a game changer, because also in my recovery, my youngest daughter wanted to come and live with her dad. And I knew getting my apartment for the first time living on my own in many, many years, I got a 2-bedroom. I got a 2-bedroom intentionally because I wanted my daughter to come and live with me. Well, that happened. She came and she lived with me. I gave her a stable and safe environment from what she had to go through living with her alcoholic mother and alcoholic stepfather. Because yeah, these circles are all intertwined in one way or another. So I get this job opportunity, I get this offer, contingent upon successful completion of this background check. They find all my bullshit. I had to go around to all the courts, submit them copies of the court reports. But here's the kicker, is they wanted copies of the police reports. And what does that mean? That means that's the officer's rendition of what took place that day, that night that I committed that offense. It also is their rendition or their report of the witness and what they recall from the events that took place. It also is those incidences where I was picked up I was out in the community where I would pass out. The officer that picked me up, their description of those events, of how I looked, how I sounded, how I appeared, everything. So here I am 4 years sober. The court reports, no problem. I knew that they were there. I see my offenses. It's on paper. But it's when I had to go pick up those police reports, because now I get another person's view and opinion on what took place, what they saw, what they heard, what they witnessed, who they interviewed, the people that were interviewed, those witness reports. And that's the lowest that I had felt. And I can't tell you how long. My self-esteem went from up here to, I'm going to take it off camera. It just went down there, because it reminded me of how low I was and how out of control I was, and the things that I did to others, the things that I did to myself, the kind of person I was. But I didn't pick up. And I just reminded myself that that's not me. That is not who I am. And that's not who I am sober. And that's not me anymore. This is who I am today. So I started the path. Fortunately, I have a cousin who is an attorney. The same cousin So the cousin that's sober on the West Coast, that's his sister. His sister is an attorney.
Okay.
She thought it was fantastic that she finally saw her cousin get sober, and she saw me at my worst as well. Because their house always hosted family parties, and they always had a lot of alcohol, and they'd always catch me sneaking in the back, drinking off the bottles in the back, not out of glasses like everybody else. So when she knew I was sober and she knew the situation I was facing, she offered her services free of charge to help me expunge my record.
That's awesome.
So now here I am many years later, and this is the fucked up thing is because I had so many misdemeanors and so many infractions that the Bureau of Criminal Investigation would only expunge X amount of charges. So what we then went in is we had all the other charges reduced to infractions. So now I have no misdemeanors showing on my record, but I have a shitload of infractions. But infractions could be a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, or jaywalking, or not paying this fine, but it's not showing up as a criminal offense or anything else. But then they wouldn't. I had so many infractions that they said they couldn't expunge the remainder that I have. However, I'm very grateful for what I was able to
I was
have.
gonna say you're still in a good position.
I am, and this job was a wonderful opportunity too, because they too found those offenses, because I hadn't had it expunged yet, and I've been with this company for 3 years. And HR contacted me directly. The vice president of HR said, "We want to offer you the job, but we have a concern with what we found on your background. Do you have some time to talk?" I said, "Absolutely." Called her up directly. She asked me, "Can you tell me a little bit more about what we found when we conducted our background check?" I said, "Yes, absolutely. I am not going to be dishonest in any way, shape, or form. I'm in recovery." In first words, "That's fantastic. Congratulations." Because I had been in recovery. This was 3 years ago. I got this job, 6 years. I said, "I'm in 6 years in recovery." Her words were fantastic. That is amazing. And I told her the same thing I told Morgan Stanley. Everything that you saw, everything that you see is a direct result of me drinking or being under the influence of something, but I'm 6 years sober. So brief conversation. She said, "Well, we here at my company's name believe in second chances. Welcome to the team." And here I am, 3 years later, promoted twice already in 3 years and 9 years sober. It works, man. It can happen. And I just want to if anything I can say is reach out. You're not alone. Never give up. And you can only do it for yourself, because you're the one that you have to wake up to in the morning, and you're the one that matters when you go to sleep at night. Everything else will fall into place, but you need to do it for yourself first.
Well, my friend, thank you so much for everything, because I literally haven't spoken much at all today. And what that means is I didn't have to guide it in any way, shape, or form. You guided the boat perfectly down this conversation. Got right down the brass tacks and then some.
Well, I appreciate it. And if there is ever another opportunity on another topic related to recovery, I would love to participate again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about doing some two different types of formats where maybe we talk about like a topic discussion with some just people, things like that. Because I did a topic discussion, which was a roundtable, which was with people who actually work in the field. But maybe we can do some with some just regular, good old fashioned addicts, some roundtables. But we'll see. But for everyone else that's listening, if you could go below, subscribe, also give us a like. Go to our YouTube channel and check out all the different videos we have. It's going back about 15 episodes now. You can go to our Facebook group and page, give us a like there. Under the Facebook group, the events tab, you'll see all of our Zoom meetings, because we do Zoom meetings daily. And that's all I got for today. So until next time, folks.